Okay, so the first splint we're going to put on is a thumb spica. There's lots of different ways to do this, and many people advocate different ways to put the position of the thumb. You can actually put the thumb straight up. That's sort of the classic teaching. There's a thumb to the side, which is the beer cup holding or wine holding, or sometimes also called a Wisconsin thumb spica. It's nice and easy because it lets you put your arm through your sleeve, because you can't put that through a sleeve. Okay. When we start putting padding on, we leave the thumb, the hand in a neutral position. We want to put a couple layers at the end because there's pressure points there. This is for Terry. Remember, see how this rolls off nice and easy as opposed to doing this and then you have to keep pulling it and wrapping. So this way we get about 3 to 4 layers on the end. After that, you really only want about a 50% overlap, so you end up with roughly 2 layers everywhere, and that should be more than enough to keep the plaster from damaging the skin. But not so much padding that it actually makes your splint put extra pressure on places. The other place you want to do it is extra bony prominences, so specifically here at the wrist, we want to go to put an extra layer there, and then we're just going to wrap, again, 50% as we go up. For a thumb spica, we're going to go roughly to the mid-forearm. Some people actually advocate going all the way up the forearm, and there even is a long thumb spica where you actually go up past the elbow. But for most of our uncomplicated injuries, a mid-arm forearm is fine. Again, at the end, we're going to put a few extra rolls because that's another one of the pressure points. Ten layers of plaster is probably more than enough for an upper arm. For a lower extremity, you're going to want to use 15 layers. You can pre-measure this or actually just measure it as you're ready to apply. We're going to measure this out from the tip of the thumb out to where our end of our wrapping is. And these usually you can tear fairly easily without having to use a pair of scissors. Many people, when they're doing a thumb spike, will wet their plaster and then just actually take this and wrap it around to form a mold to keep the thumb up. I like to take mine and tear it into 3 sections at the end. Forming a W. It's the Warman thumb spica. And then each of those 3 sections, as you'll see, will actually mold around the thumb and keep it up. I like to use really hot water, but the books will actually recommend that you use tepid water. I use hot water because it sets faster. If you use more room temperature water, it gives you more time for molding if you need to. So completely immerse it in there, and then I like to take the strips and just use my fingers to get the excess water out, and it actually molds the plaster strips together. Trying as good as I can not to get it all over the floor. Then you can take your wet plaster, put it up on your hand, and then I use my torn or cut ends to mold around the thumb. And then I'm careful to not let any extra pieces form sharp ends so you can mold them down with your fingers. And I like to take my hand and just kind of mold the rest of the plaster down along where it goes, again molding the edge end so you don't get any sharp ends. I'll then use one last little bit of web roll just to quickly lock this in place. Smoothing down any rough edges that we've torn off, and then we're ready to wrap. Some people will take this and actually cut the end so that it actually slips over the thumb. I don't bother doing that. I find it works just as well to take your small elastic wrap and wrap the thumb this way, and then you can just as easily get it to go around the thumb. You don't want to pull this really, really taut when you're putting these on, just a little amount of stretch to do the compression. And again, roughly wrapping about halfway up. And if you need to, using an extra web roll, excuse me, an extra elastic band to get to the end. This one will be a little large, so we'll just do a little overlap here. And you can see with these longer ones, you end up with quite a bit of extra on the end if you're doing a shorter splint. Then you can just kind of check and make sure that your molding is where you want it. Again, your thumb spica can be a straight up one like this, or if you want to do a Wisconsin one, you can actually mold the hand into a position of function, and in that case, the wrist should actually be back at about 20 degrees, just in the form of making a C or grabbing a cup. And then the thumb can be off to the side. Check your molding again, making sure your ends don't have any sharp sides there, and then just letting it rest so there's no pressure on the plaster side while you're letting this harden for the 5 to 10 minutes that it takes. When you're doing any molding, you want to be sure not to use your fingertips to push, because that can leave dents and cause pressure points. You want to make sure if you're doing any molding, you're actually using your palms as the flat part of your hand.